Charlie Smith, welcome to the Mindset Advantage, man. It's an absolute joy and a pleasure to have you on the show today, man. Looking forward to this for several weeks. You're a guy I really look up to in the space. Thanks for your time today.
DJ, it's amazing to be here. It's really interesting to me how our world works today. You know, how a guy from where you're from and a guy from California, can feel like we've known each other long before we even popped on this call together, just by the connection we made. And I appreciate the work that you do. I appreciate the effort you put into this podcast, and really, it's a privilege to be on with you today, man.
Thanks. I'm looking forward to this. I think first we need to start with you have a incredibly powerful story in childhood, and I'm familiar with it. But for my listeners that are getting to know you first, I think that's where we have to start to set the table of who is Charlie Smith. Can you walk us through a little bit of your upbringing?
Yeah, sure. I appreciate the question. As we talked about, when it comes to my past, I think people see people in the world and we make assumptions about how they got to where they are. And sometimes we have the wrong assumptions because we don't know what's gone on in someone else's life. So for me, I grew up in a small town in Scarborough, Maine. I'm actually living in California now. My dad was a college professor. My mom was a first grade school teacher. Look, we look like every other middle class family in Scarborough, Maine, but that was not the reality of my life. From the age of about 6 until the age of 19, I was physically abused at the hands of a violent father. And I'm not talking about a strict dad. I'm not talking about a disciplinarian. I'm not talking about a guy who wanted, his rules followed. He got the belt. I mean, my friends had dads like that. I'd have killed for one. I'm talking about a violent man who would put his fist through my face at the age of 19. He had a 45 caliber pistol leveled at my head. My brother was home from the Navy. Fortunately, that night it was Christmas Eve. He knocked him off, and I left home at Scarborough, Maine, from Scarborough, Maine, at the age of 19 with a bunch of student loans and credit card debt, never to return and to make it on my own in the world. Um, and really, I don't tell that story for sympathy, or I don't tell it for effect. I tell it because it's the truth. And for a lot of years, DJ, I didn't want to admit it was the truth. And what I did is I buried it and I put it in a place where I thought I could forget about it. And then I went off to chase material wealth and success and power and prestige, really at the expense of my self-worth. And so, that's part of what makes me who I am now. And when I get up, Ben Newman has this idea of what's your burn, and I write on a little piece of paper every day, man, that kid's my burn, because he fought. He didn't have the world at his back, the wind at his back. The deck might have been stacked against him, but he said, you know what? These are my cards, man. I'm going to make a go of this. And I struggled along the way, by the age of 42, as a result of not dealing with it. I think one of my messages, especially when I speak to young people, middle-aged people, adults, is what you don't deal with will deal with you. So you have to have an honest look at what's gone on in your life and then tell yourself an appropriate story. I told myself the wrong story about it, which is where the platform my pen came from. But by the age of 42, I was a full-blown alcoholic and drug addict. I was running a successful commercial real estate company, but because I had denied this really painful part of my past and not dealt with it and told the wrong story about it, like somehow something was wrong with me instead of something was wrong with my dad. I viewed my mistakes as I was a mistake. I viewed my failures as I was a failure. I viewed that was being done to me because something was wrong with me. And it was just, flat out the wrong story. But, by the age of 42, I had another battle to face. And on February 14th of 2023, I celebrated 15 years of continuous sobriety. So I faced that dragon and didn't sidestep the lizard. I faced that dragon. And so, my message is really about all that is, we elevate through adversity, and you might not have the same story as me. You might not have faced similar things as me, but man, you might have lost your starting position. You might have had a breakup with a girlfriend. You might have not gotten into the school you wanted to get into, and you may be feeling just like I felt.
Wow, Charlie, take me back to the age of 16 to 19. What were some of the things that helped you during this time? I mean, there had to have been something that you went to that was able to help break away from your father. To take me back to some of those moments. What was helpful during those moments?
Yeah, so we do things in pattern because we get a payoff from them. So there were three different things that I used as a way to deal with what was going on in my life. So my dad was a college professor. There were two behaviors that were acceptable for me to be out of my house. One was school. So if I was at school, I could be out of my house. The other was work. So I found that if I, I started, like, I had a paper route in Scarborough, Maine at the age of, I mean, I was probably 7 or 8, man. You know what winters are like, right? But I was out there 5 o'clock in the morning before school on my bike or walking with my paper route because as soon as I get up, I wanted to get out. And so work separated me from home. I established a very committed work ethic, unparalleled work ethic. I mean, I have, from the age of 7 or 8 at that paper route, I'm 57 now, and I've never been fired, demoted, laid off, written up from any position I've ever had, because of that work ethic. So I worked to escape. I did really well and applied myself in school. I think one of the most interesting stories about mindset is from when I was in kind of that early elementary school stage of my life. I was not able to focus or pay attention in school. DJ, the teachers put me in special ed. When you're suffering from complex trauma and your life is always being threatened, trying to pay attention to math classes like, walking on eggshells. So I was really not a very good student at that age. And my report cards reflected it. And my mom said to me, and I'll never forget this conversation. She said, we're stuck here. I don't know how to get you out of here. I don't think I can stop what's happening to you. And I think if it keeps happening, you're going to end up, really hurt or dead. And the only way I can see you getting out of here is if we can get you to college. And it was that moment where my mindset shifted from school was a threat to school was an opportunity. You hear me? And what happened in that moment is I went to a private Jesuit school that I worked every summer to pay for. Chever's High School at the time was like $1,000, 1980. And within a year of getting put into special ed, I was an honor roll student at a private Jesuit university. And my point is, I didn't get a brain transplant. I didn't get a bunch of tutors, but my mindset shifted from threat to opportunity, and I laid into school. And the other unfortunate coping skill that I learned was disempowering. So I had my first drink at the age of 12, and that changed the way I felt. So those were the three things that gave me healthy and unhealthy escapes. The fourth and overarching part of my life, and one of the pillars of the pen, were my friends. I had really good friends. I hung out with good people, guys that wanted to pull me out of that dark place, guys that wanted to help me find jobs, guys that wanted me to stay at their house, really guys on the football team, guys on the baseball team, guys that own, young guys in college, in my high school rather, that were already in the workforce, guys that were running construction companies. I gravitated towards those guys because they were a way for me to get out of my house. So community and connection was really important. My work ethic, my pursuit of academics as a solution, all kind of got me through those tough times, man.
Charlie, tell me about loaded question, but tell me about the advice that you want to give the kids that are listening right now. And maybe they're dealing with something as severe as what you were going through, or maybe it's just not just, but maybe it's I don't have a great relationship with my parents, or maybe something in between. What's the advice you're giving to kids right now who want to improve the relationship with their parents? And maybe it's really severe, maybe it's not, but it's clearly a gap in their life. What's the advice that you would give going through what you've gone through if a kid is looking for some advice on that to you? What do you say?
It's a great question. First of all, nobody can define you but you. We have to have empathy and compassion for our parents' experience in life. They are the combination of whatever they've been through in their lives. And let's face it, they went to the hospital and had me, and they didn't go to parenting school. My father, despite all of his character flaws, was raised by somebody who gave him a personality that he acted out on me, and his pain was projected on me. So first thing I would tell people is to have some compassion and some understanding for other people in your life, because we don't know the bag of trouble that they're carrying with. And then the second part is, and I think the most important part, is to recognize your worth as being independent of who they are, and understanding you have to decide how you want to show up in that relationship, right? I'm responsible for my own life. I'm responsible for how I respond. And so if I'm kind of fuel to that fire and I'm getting under somebody's skin and I'm constantly, kind of acting out, not making my bed, staying past curfew, am I adding gasoline to an already toxic situation, or am I taking care of myself and living by, a good set of principles and values myself? So, empathy, compassion for what someone's going through, self-protection and self-care by developing your own internal ad campaign. And I think the most important kind of bridge between those things is having your own self-worth, recognizing that your self-worth is dependent upon you and not on anybody else. And what somebody thinks or does not define you. You get to define your life for yourself.
What I'm also hearing too, and what you're saying to piggyback, Charlie, is that we never know what people are going through. And I think that's such a great lesson for us to, as we walk through this life. I get a chance to work at a gym with about 215 members. And every day I'm reminded that, look, we don't know what's going on in people's lives behind closed doors. You said that you guys were on a cover of a magazine and both your parents were in the education system. From the outside, everybody thought, most people thought things were okay. And I think it's a great lesson for us as people that most people are going through something. We might not know what it is, but not everything looks as great as it may look either online or on a magazine cover. Talk to me a little bit about that life lesson. I think that's really powerful from person to person.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because it's very true. I think, Brene Brown says comparison is the thief of joy. We look at other people, we compare our insides to their outsides, and we have this kind of um, magnifying mind that projects what we think. And the truth is, everybody has their own issues that they're dealing with. Insecurity, doubt, fear, and worry are a normal part and a natural part of people's lives, and everybody's experience is different. So we can't treat somebody like their life is perfect and that they're treating us a certain way because of, something that we project on them. We have to really, honestly, the word that comes to mind, continues to come to mind, is empathy, which is really understanding we don't know. And empathy is a skill of leadership. Empathy is a skill of being a human being. It's a competitive skill, but really understanding what it is that's going on in someone else's life and that we don't always know what that is, I think is really important, just from a perspective standpoint, right? You can have the lens of whatever glasses you're wearing, and if you have glasses of empathy or compassion, then you might be more understanding and more help to somebody else. That's really, if we take that full circle, what's the reason you want to have empathy and compassion? Because our role in life as leaders in any level is to be of service. You can have anything you want. I think Zig Ziglar says, you can have anything you want in life, the more you help other people get what they want. And sometimes what people want is just somebody to understand them, to accept them. That's what happened to me. To your point, one of the things that got me through what I was going through were my friends. And despite everything that looked externally on the outside like I came from a perfect family, they wanted to know, why was I doing the things that I was doing? Why was I crying like I was crying? Why was I withdrawing like I was withdrawing? What's going on with you, Charlie? I think it's the most powerful question you can ask somebody is, hey, what's going on with you? Something's off. It doesn't seem like you're who you usually are. Is there anything you want to talk to me about? That's really, I see your stay curious sign. It's like, if you can get curious, right, and compassionate and empathetic, you can draw and actually be a lifeline for somebody. So more important than just understanding you don't know what's going on with them, let's look even further and see, hey, how can we be of maximum service to our fellow human beings? That's leadership.
We have a mutual friend in Brian Kane, and Brian tells a story that's pretty awesome about an MMA fighter he worked with coming off of a loss, and they were sitting at a restaurant. You probably heard him say this, and he pulled a brick out of his bag, and he asked the fighter to hold the brick out in front of him, and he said, "Hey, could you hold this for 1 minute with a straight arm?" And the fighter's like, "Yeah, obviously I can hold this for a minute. It's not very heavy." And he goes, "Well, could you hold it for 10 minutes?" He's like, "Ah, maybe. I don't know. It'd be tough." And he goes, "Could you hold it for 10 days?" He's like, "No, I couldn't hold it for 10 days." And the moral of the story is, well, then why are you holding on to the loss that you just had the last week or the last time he was in the octagon? And it was a great, physical example of letting go of the past and letting go of the hardships. I'm curious, Charlie, how does somebody like you go through something so traumatic for so many years? How did you let it go? When did you let it go? And then third, what's the advice for people that are still holding on to the trauma in their life from their childhood?
So the best that your questions are phenomenal, and thank you for digging in. So the best analogy I can give people is simply the windshield and the rearview mirror of their car. Everybody will get into their car with their parents on their way home from school, or if you drive, you have a license, you're going to drive to your job or to your practice. When you get in that car, there's two pieces of glass that you're sitting in front of. There is your windshield and there's the rearview mirror. Both of those are important. You can't drive without them. But which one is bigger? The windshield is 15 times bigger, 20 times bigger than your rearview mirror, because it's more important about where you're going than where you've been. I spent 42 years looking in the rearview mirror, and it caused me to keep getting into a bunch of accidents, right? And so the idea is to not let what I had to do is I had to not let the events of my past define me. I had to define them. And so the idea was, what happened to me happened to me. It's kind of like when a plane crashes, right? What's the first thing they do? They get the black box. They cannot do anything about the plane that went down, but they can make sure that they learn everything they need to avoid the next plane going down. So we accept reality. This happened, but then I had to take the pen to that story and give it meaning, which was, no, I'm not a victim. I'm a survivor. No, I'm not somebody who experienced, this disempowering thing that happened to me. I'm somebody who survived somebody else who tried to do something to me. So you have to change that narrative, accept that my dad had whatever issues he had. My coach had whatever, input, whoever has caused you pain in your life. And then you have to take the pen to the story of your life and decide, who am I going to be? Because what I had done is I had become who all those people had told me I would be. Follow me? I had given them the pen to the story of my life. I had let them write on the pages of my life. I kept reading what my dad wrote instead of saying, hey, wait a minute now. He doesn't deserve this pen. And so forgiveness, deeper subject, but really important. Resentment, deeper subject, but important. Resentment's like drinking poison, hoping somebody else dies. So I walked around having this kind of victim mentality instead of this victor mentality and creator mentality and author of my own life. And so, the way I dealt with it was taking responsibility for my life, deciding the kind of person that I wanted to become, and then becoming that person, and letting my dad off the hook for the things that he did. The more I held him responsible for my life, the deeper I dug that hole.
Resentment is like drinking poison and hoping somebody else dies. That's great. Another one, I want you to go a little bit deeper on this. I had this one written down. I love that you said it. You're never defined by events in your life because you get to define them. Take that one more step further. That's a powerful statement, Charlie. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. And that's why I always say the deck isn't stacked against me. They're my cards. You know, I get to define and give meaning to everything that happens in my life. And so am I giving it a disempowering meaning or a powerful meaning? And this gets into the kind of the three pitfalls of performance. Because I make a mistake doesn't mean I'm a mistake, right? I get to define that mistake as something that made me stronger, taught me a lesson, showed me how not to do it. I just got better, right? Because I failed doesn't mean I'm a failure. It means I learned something about how I can get better, right? So all of these things, mistakes, failures, setbacks, I can either say they show something negative about me. I just don't have it. I had this, we were in a playoff run at our local high school, and kind of as an opportunity for me to get back to our local community. I work with the kids, and our first string running back got injured. Our second string running back fractured his ankle. So our backup cornerback comes in as our starting running back during our playoff run. First game, away game, big game in the playoffs, first possession, fumbles the ball.
Well,
Comes over to the sideline, coach, man, I just don't have it. I just don't have it today. I don't know what's going on. I say, let's have a good, bad day. Sometimes we don't have it. He goes, they keep telling me not to fumble. They keep telling me not to fumble. How do I stop thinking about fumbling? I said, you don't. Start thinking about scoring touchdowns. That's what we're here to do. Let's start thinking about first downs. Let's start thinking about next possession. That play doesn't define you. What you do next does. You're big, you're strong, you're cocky, you're a real life Rocky. Let's get your mind right. And, sure enough, he never turned the ball over the rest of the game. But if he had let that first play define him, right, that I'm just not able to take care of the football. I'm just not prepared for this big moment. I'm a backup cornerback now starting. It's just not my, all those things could have defined him. But instead, we gave it meaning, which is, hey, you just learned how to hold on to the football better. You just learned how to take care of the ball. You just learned how to get to the next play. So we have the ability to write a different story about every event in our life and give it meaning. And that either propels us forward or it propels us backwards.
Man, I love it. You're firing me up. I wear a bracelet that says E plus R equals O. And I know you're familiar with the concept, but for the listeners that aren't, E plus R equals O stands for E is the events in our lives. The R is the response, not the reaction, but the response. And there's a difference between those two. And then the O is the outcome. What's really cool about this, and Charlie, obviously, you know, but the E and the O is completely outside of our control. The only thing we can control is our response, and our response should be calculated. It should be not emotionally driven, and it should be something that the kind of person that we want to represent. And so I think it's another great way to kind of highlight what you're saying, Charlie, is we don't control the events. We don't control the outcome. We can only control how we respond and who we want to be, whether it's on the field or in the classroom.
Yeah, my bracelet says courage, and that's one of my core principles, and that is about how I respond. That is the R. I need to respond courageously. Courage. Just so your listeners are clear, because people have, I think, a skewed view of courage. Courage is not this rogue bravery. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is uncertainty, doubt, and worry, and taking that next right action anyways. And it is true that we don't control events, and it is true we don't completely control outcomes. It is true that we can control response, but are you training? Are you conditioning yourself to respond in a positive way? Because our emotions are like waves, right? They can get really big. And if we don't have a way to kind of ride them and figure out, how do I respond in this situation? Mike Tyson says everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Our special force guys say the best battle plans are great until you make first contact with the enemy, right? So the idea is, what is your conditioned response? How are you conditioning your response to adversity, knowing that it's going to come? And I think that's what we as mental performance coaches, as mental conditioning coaches, have the ability to do, is help give our clients, student athletes, leaders a way to respond, because it's important to say and understand, but it's way more important to do.
I love it. You teased a little bit your famous phrase of own the pen, own the story of your life. Can you teach my listeners? This is some awesome and very just powerful stuff. I've been psyched to hear about this a little bit more. Tell me about your framework of what it means to own the pen to your own life.
Yeah, thank you. So I believe we should all be the intentional authors of our lives. And when you write the story of your own life, you should never let anyone else hold the pen. And there's 5 pillars to the pen, and they all trail mental performance skills. But the first is know who you are. So having that self-awareness, that self-confidence, that internal ad campaign, is critical to writing your story. Knowing where you're going, right? Which is having an idea about goals and dreams. Dream big. Some of your dreams should make you uncomfortable, but then take those dreams and convert them to goals. Your goals should be in your controls. We're target seeking mechanisms. So if you don't know where you're going, young man, young woman, you might end up somewhere else. So you need to know who you are, and you need to know where you're going. And then you need to know how you're going to go there. These are your daily behaviors, your routines and habits. I'll always ask somebody, you got a card from me, and on the back of it, what did it say? Is what you want for your life consistent with what you do in your life? So if you're sitting there and you're a student athlete and you're telling your coaches and your parents that you want to play college sports, and you know that the ability to play college sports goes up dramatically based on your GPA, and you're not buckling down in the classroom, then you don't really want to play at the next level, or you'd be buckled down in the classroom, at home in the morning, on the field in the afternoon, or pitch or diamond or wherever you're playing, and you'd be dialed in at night. So we have to make sure that our routines and our habits and how we go through our day from the time we wake up to the time we go to bed matches those goals and dreams. And then we need to know who we become on the way there. So in pursuit of your goals and dreams, do you have a set of core principles? Do you have a set of core values? Core principles are behaviors, above the line, below the line. Do you know how you're going to behave on a regular basis? So as you pursue your goals, you're happy with who you become. I pursued my goals, right? By the age of 42, I was one of the most active retail developers in the state of California. Great. I couldn't look myself in the mirror. I was unfaithful to my wife. I had driven my car with my kids, when I had been on prescription medication. I did not like the man who I was looking at in the mirror, because I didn't have values and principles to live by. So know who you become on the way to pursuing these goals. Are you the best person on the team or the best person for the team? Values are really important, DJ. Values, these are the things that you say are valuable to you. And I'll tell you this, it's like a garden. The only thing that makes what you value valuable is how you invest in it. I have a great story. When I was in college, I was an economics major. Tom Rooney was an accounting major. Tom had to take a microeconomics class as part of his accounting major. We both study for a midterm. We get the grades back. He says, "How'd you do?" I said, "I did great. I got a B." And he looked at me. This is my sophomore year in college. And he says, "Aren't you an economics major, Charlie?" I said, "Yeah." So he goes, "Well, I'm an accounting major. And if I got a B on an accounting exam, I'd be a little disappointed in myself. I'd have taken my major more seriously." And I was like, after I wanted to punch him in the face, I was like, wow, you know something? You're absolutely right. Here's the rest of the story. I took Tom's advice. I took my economics classes seriously. I became one of the top economics students at our school. And junior year, when the economics department was handing out internships to go in to New York City, I was the one that got the internship. Charlie, the average student, the B student, isn't getting that internship. And that internship led to my first job out of college in commercial real estate, which propelled a 30-year career as a commercial real
Wow.
estate investor and developer because I invested in what I said was valuable. So you need to understand what you value, and then you need to invest in it to make it valuable. And that's how you know who you become on the way there. And then the fifth pillar is something we've already touched on, which is community and connection. Know who you're going to go with. Who's in your five? You're the average of the five people you spend the most time with. If you're hanging out with people playing video games, hitting a pen, cheating on tests, then you're going to be the fifth. You know, you've got to hang around empowering people. You know, your vibe will attract your tribe, and you should be around people that are happy for your success, that point out your blind spots and give you corrective and, you know, guidance as to how you can improve, you know, and you should be that in others people's lives. Dale Carnegie wrote one of my favorite books called How to Win Friends and Influence People. In that book, he says this: if you want to have a friend, you need to be a friend. So what's your give get ratio in your relationship? So build a community and connection of people around you that are doing the things that you want to do. Some of them should be a little further along their journey than you. You know, some of them should motivate you and inspire you, but all of them should support and encourage you along the way. You need people, you need to be around people that believe in you. It's, I think, fundamental to building community and connection. So those are the five pillars of the pen that everybody should stand by.
Man, ton of wisdom in there. I love this concept of write the story of your life and don't let anybody else hold the pen. For the listeners out there, Charlie, I want to simplify it a little bit more. Could you give me 2 to 3 examples of what it looks like to write your own story? And then can you give me 2 to 3 examples of what it looks like to let someone else hold the pen? I just want to polarize what both of them look like for the listeners. What's an example of letting someone else hold the pen? And what's an example of you writing your own story? Maybe 2 or 3 on either side.
Yeah. So letting somebody else hold the pen is letting somebody else dictate your future. So you're not good enough. You'll never cut it there. No one in our family has ever. You know, these are, you know, you're not that good in math. You know, you're not as fast as other kids are. You know, you don't, you're not, you, all of these disempowering statements, you know,
Mhm.
and some of them, by the way, they're very innocuous. They're not intentional. They're just people's own narrative about what their own observation based on their own view of the world. And that is letting somebody else write the story of your life. You know, all of those statements would be giving the pen away, because our imagination, right? The goals and dreams you have, if you see yourself 3 or 5 years from now, that vision of you is coming to you, right? Because it's true. It has meaning. It's not coming to you because you shouldn't pursue it. But other people, because of their own comparison, their own ego, their own insecurities, project on our life. So that's giving the pen to the story of our lives to somebody else. You won't make it here. You're not good enough. Pick you're not good enough, not smart enough, not fast enough. You know, you can Google this guy. I think it's Anderson Yoga. You know, this guy was a paratrooper in the military. You know, really crashed up his legs, ballooned up to about 300 pounds, started doing yoga. Doctor said, "You'll never walk again. Resign yourself to a wheelchair." Those people were writing on the pages of our lives. He got with Diamond Dave from the UFC, from the WWE. He started doing yoga. And in the last clip of the video, the guy's running through a park, jogging.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
Because he didn't let someone else write on the pages of his life. So what I mean when I say you own the pen of the story is write down who you want to be, write down what you want to be, write down who you want to become, write down how you can become that. and then live that dream and goal. I always say, if your dreams are worth having, and they are, they're worth fighting for, but you need to author them. You need to decide, not somebody else, who you want to become. I don't care if that's artist or quarterback in the NFL. Have an idea of who you want to become and take ownership of it. Like literally, DJ, like own that story, and don't let anybody else deter you from the pursuit of that dream.
So we're really talking about, what I'm hearing a lot is just, it's overcoming limiting beliefs. And I love what you said about, sometimes they're not on purpose. Sometimes it's not people, bagging on you, telling you these things that are bad. It's just, sometimes it's just a natural conversation, and enough of those compound over years and years, maybe with your parents, and you start to believe this. Is one of the questions maybe that could help a student athlete or a college athlete overcoming limiting beliefs? I'm thinking of the question, is this true? Is it true? And starting to look in the mirror of the question of, is this actually true about myself? Right? Like, I can't run fast. Is that true? Is that a question you like, Charlie? What are the questions you like to work with when you're working with somebody on overcoming self-limiting beliefs? Are there a question? Is there a platform? Is there a series of questions? How do you work through some of that?
So, phenomenal question, foundational question. Okay. Limiting beliefs serve as a gatekeeper to healthy core beliefs. So when you've installed a limiting belief, Dr. Joe Dispenza says, neurons that fire together wire together. And so when you hear something from somebody, a limiting belief, and you think about it, your mind will connect that thought and then look for proof and evidence to prove that that's true. Our minds are wired to filter our belief system. And so if we have limiting beliefs, we could come in second in a race and go, see, that guy is right, I'm not fast enough. Versus,
Right.
well, I got to work a little harder on my split times. I got to work a little harder on my repeats. We're not thinking that. We're thinking, oh, I must not be true. So limiting beliefs are a gatekeeper to healthy core beliefs. The best way I could describe them is like, imagine that you have a table, a hard table, and you pour a bunch of water on it, which are healthy core beliefs that you want to absorb about yourself. And I give you a sponge, which is your subconscious mind, to absorb those healthy core beliefs, but I wrap it in cellophane. That's limiting beliefs. Impossible to absorb your healthy core beliefs. So to answer your question, I have a framework that I use called awareness, challenge, change.
Mm.
And if you don't know the story of Andy the elephant, this guy and his dad, this little kid and his dad go to the local circus, and as they're walking by the circus, these elephants in these small towns pull up the tent, kind of old school, with these huge ropes. And then when they're done, the guy that owns the circus kind of stakes these elephants, outside of the circus tent on these little stakes with this rope attached to their ankle. And this guy's walking by with his son, says to the guy that runs the circus, he goes, mind if I ask you a question? That elephant weighs a few tons. How is that elephant not running away when all he's got is a little wooden stake and a rope around his ankle to hold him in place? And he says, oh, that's easy. He says, that's Andy. Andy the elephant, when he was little, just a few 100 pounds, we took that stake and that rope and we tied it to his ankle. And as he was young and kind of full of energy, he would try to pull it away, but it was too strong for him. So as he grew up, he continues to believe and lost his fight to run because he believes that stake and that little rope will continue to hold him in place. And so I just ask you, what stake and rope has somebody put around your ankle? Because you're now a 2-ton elephant and you could pull that rope and that stake out and have a free and amazing life, but you're tethered to it because of limiting beliefs. You believe the limits that were placed on you as a young person by other people. By the way, just to back up, sometimes, unfortunately, people do those things because they think it's protecting you. They didn't reach their dreams. They didn't reach their goals. They played small. So they're cautioning you against pursuing yours, but you're not them, right? You're not them. So we have to be aware that we have these limiting beliefs. Awareness precedes choice. Choice precedes change. Then we have to ask ourselves empowering questions. Yours is my favorite. Is it true? Said by who, right? We are not born with limiting beliefs. If I were to walk into a kindergarten classroom and say, who here could run a triathlon? And there were 13 kids in the room, 26 hands would go up. They'd be like, oh, me. They don't even know what one is, but they don't have any limiting beliefs. So the first thing is awareness. The second thing, challenge it. Is it true? Said by who? Let's identify where this came from. Parent, teacher, coach, friend, cafeteria experience. It wasn't you. Sometimes it's just your inner critic, which we all have. And then, is it helpful? Is it kind? So is it true? Said by who? Is it helpful? Is it actually helping you pursue your goals and dreams? Is it kind and useful? If you can't answer all of those questions, then let's change it. And that's where the real work comes in, is actually, I call it a limiting belief inventory, getting that third column down and saying, okay, what's a core belief that I can believe about myself, right? That I can use to replace that. And then you literally cross out that limiting belief. And then you start to read, write, and behave as the person in that new core belief. But that's kind of my framework for overcoming limiting beliefs. It's foundational to developing an elite mindset, because you're just not going to pursue with the energy that you need to your healthy core beliefs with those limiting beliefs in place. I don't want anyone being Andy the elephant, right?
What a great story. I think a great I love empowering questions. I'm such a believer in great questions lead to great answers. Probably why I'm a podcast host. But I think the question here, Charlie, is what's a belief that's limiting you from becoming the type of person you want to become? What's a belief that's limiting you from becoming the type of person you want to become? I think asking that question, whether it's to yourself, listeners, really ask yourself that question. Let it sink in. Or maybe it's to your high school student athlete, or maybe it's to your team. Asking that question and letting it sit for a moment, and letting it sit for a moment right now, and think about, what is that belief? Because I think everybody has one, Charlie. I think everybody has one. And let's get it out there. Let's get it on paper. I think there's some power in also addressing it, putting pen to paper, and look, going, hey, this is what it is. And maybe having this moment, I'm just seeing like a team in front of me. I work with a lot of teams. I could see a powerful moment of a team where each kid writes down their self-limiting belief. And maybe you and another kid have the same belief. And maybe there's some connection there where you guys can hold each other accountable. I mean, what a powerful question. It's kind of a similar question of what I like to ask also is what's the one thing that's holding you back from becoming the type of person you want to become? I think that's a broad way of really asking, what's the self-limiting belief that's holding you back? And then asking, is it true? Said by who? That's a powerful, powerful question. You guys listening right now, I want you to think about wherever you are in your life. If you're 15 years old and you got your permit, or if you are 55 years old and you're about to be a grandparent, I want you to think about, what's a belief that's limiting you from becoming the type of person that you want to become? What is it? It's good stuff, Charlie.
But I don't hear enough people bringing attention to limiting beliefs and how to overcome them, and so we are in Trevor Moawad's dad's book, which sits behind me, The Secret to the Slight Edge. I read that before Trevor's book, It Takes What It Takes, come out. And in that book, he says champions are born and then can be unmade, right? And unmade by all of these kind of negative experiences. By the age of 5, a normal human being growing up in a healthy environment has heard 40,000 no's,
Oh,
5,000 yeses,
oh,
40,000 no's. Don't run. Don't do that. Don't stop. We're just being told what we shouldn't be, what we shouldn't do, what we can't do. You know, you're not as fast as your brother was. Why can't you be more like your sister? No one in your school wears these things, right? Over and over again, unintentionally, and we hear 5,000 yeses. But you go back and you think about it in our infancy. What's the one thing every baby gets when they're learning to walk? It's encouragement. Everybody that learns to walk is encouraged to walk. No one learning to walk is ever so, forget it. Maybe when you're 10, everybody that learns to walk is encouraged to walk, and every young kid who's able to walk walks. Everybody gets encouraged. Why do we stop encouraging? Why do we start limiting? You tell me. I can't figure it out.
yeah.
So it's up to us to be aware of it. Thank you for that awareness. I think is a superpower. Denying that we have them would be a mistake, because then we can't do anything about them. So awareness, challenge, change.
And I think as professional speakers and facilitators like we are, I think one of the best things we could do, Charlie, and feel free to disagree, is to create a safe and to create a platform where kids and student athletes can share what that limiting belief is, right? Because it'd be easy to sit on it, put it under the table until you're 42 years old, like you were talking about in your story. It would be easy to do that, but what a great opportunity for a breakthrough for a young kid if you created the platform or the space. So the coaches out there, the teachers out there, the parents out there, can you create a space where you can have a conversation of, hey, just out of curiosity, well, what's the belief that's limiting you from becoming the type of person you want to become? Create that space for the kids to have the conversations so they can create the awareness, and then the dominoes can start to fall.
Yeah, I'll say it this way: victory goes to the vulnerable. I mean, how many times, and it's true for me. Am I sitting in a class and the teacher's going over a topic? I have no idea what they're talking about, but I'm too nervous to say I don't know, so I don't say anything. And finally, some kid goes, "Hey, can you explain that? I don't understand it." And I'm like, "Oh, thank God somebody else asked." Right? And so I'm sitting there in a classroom of other people that didn't understand, but victory goes to the vulnerable. The person who asked the question made us all better because he brought some awareness to the fact that he didn't understand it. And if he doesn't understand it, maybe somebody else doesn't understand it. And so your point is just that victory goes to the vulnerable. That's why, for me, the shame and guilt of some of the things that as a recovering alcoholic and drug addict I went through would be easy to leave out of my story, right? It'd be easy to say I didn't do those things. I don't want you to really see that part of me, but it would be denying what I went through, and it would be denying what I've gone through and how I've come through it, right? Because no matter how far down the scale you've gone, no matter what adversity you've faced, you have the ability to start climbing out today, to make significant fundamental changes in your life today, if you'll hold the pen.
I want to go through one more piece here, and it's something that we both share a passion for. It's your first element of optimal performance. It's also in my 7 skill system. And as I work with teams and travel the country, one of the things I hear continuously from student athletes, Charlie, is that I just don't feel confident. Confidence is a huge gap with our younger student athletes, and it's your number one element. I'd just love to hear from your side and your teaching. How do you teach unshakable self-confidence? What have you learned from unshakable self-confidence? I'm just here to learn from you, man. So tell me a little bit about confidence.
Yeah. Whew. So you're awesome, man. Wow. Your question, your questions are world class. And this is according to research, the number one variable for all human performance is confidence, right? It is the driver for results. So what is self-confidence? The word confidence comes from the Latin word confidere, which means intense trust. So self-confidence is intense trust in ourselves. So the first thing that we've got to do is ask ourselves, have I developed trust in myself? And I'll give you the kind of components of trust that I look at. Do I trust myself to try? Do I trust myself to fail? Do I trust myself to learn and grow? And do I trust myself to try again? Right? Because when we're talking about confidence, there's a formula for confidence. And the formula for confidence is belief times evidence. So the first thing we've got to look at is our belief in ourselves. Getting back to limiting beliefs, right? Getting back to our core beliefs, getting back to how have we built credibility with ourselves? Have I been doing the work that I need to do? I bring together 2 fundamental research-based practices for self-confidence. The first is Albert Bandura and his 4 elements to self-efficacy, right? So it's deliberate practice. It's taking physical action. It's social modeling or visualization. It's nerve interpretation, right? And his 4th part. So there's doing a physical action. There's social modeling. There's nerve interpretation, how I'm interpreting being excited or angry, and then there's reinforcement, self-talk. So when you look at those 4 components of creating self-efficacy, that's where the belief comes from. And then the behaviors is Anders Ericsson's deliberate practice. Are you purposely practicing? Are you purposely and intensely creating pressure in practice? What are you doing to build credibility with yourself? So if you take Albert Bandura and you take Anders Ericsson, you put those two things together, you have your self-confidence formula. So it's body language. Absolutely. That's going to drive your belief in yourself. It's focus on the task at hand, focus on the present moment, right? Focus on the event, not the environment, right? And then it's your self-talk. What are you saying to yourself about yourself? Have you put the work in? Do you have credibility with yourself? If you're not, then you don't feel prepared. And then how are you reinforcing that credibility with your practice planning and the effort that you put in? And the greatest example, so self-confidence comes from your body language, your focus, and your self-talk, and your preparation. And it's a formula: belief in yourself times.
Did I lose you? Back on? Oh,
So,
shoot. Oh,
so,
wait.
so
Oh, there, I
those are
got
the
you. Okay. We were too fired up. You cut it off. Keep going.
I did. I hit them.
We're getting too
I hit
excited, Charlie.
I know. So we do, my point to you is we do confidence. Confidence is not a feeling. Confidence is an action. And the action of confidence precedes the feeling of confidence. Thank you, Russ Harris, and the confidence gap. But many people don't understand. So what are the actions? What do I need to do? And so if you go back and that framework, right? Anders Ericsson and Albert Bandura was best displayed by Tony Gonzalez. Tony Gonzalez was a highly coveted draft pick out of UCal Berkeley, probably one of the best, revolutionary the tight end position, revolutionized the tight end position. Yes or no? For sure.
Absolutely.
The second year of his NFL career, he led the league in drop passes. He had completely lost his confidence. He was sitting in a hotel room in his apartment, drinking a bunch of alcohol, in a major depression, highly coveted draft pick, leads the league in drop. You can see him pounding the ball on the ground after another drop pass. What did he do? He said, look, I was working hard in practice. Tony Gonzalez was not an average athlete, and he was not an average performer. He worked hard in practice, but he wasn't doing anything before practice, and he wasn't doing anything after practice. So in the NFL, if you're a receiver, the number of catches, the number of passes thrown to you in a practice might be 15, 20, because, you know, they're going to run plays. They're going to run screen plays. They're going to run the other receivers. They're going to run the slot guy. So he had to change what he did. What did he do? He worked my formula. He went from catching 30 passes a day to 300 a day. He visualized and would watch Steve Largent and Jerry Rice every day. He'd watch how they high point the ball. He'd watch them come in and out of their routes, watch Jerry Rice run into the end zone, right? So he'd visualize, socially model how he wanted to perform instead of watching another drop pass, right? Third, he wrote himself letters every single week about the greatness that was inside of him, about why he was drafted, about all of the things. And he would read those letters to himself over and over again. And he would go from being nervous, I'm worried about making a mistake, to excited about seeing about how I can be great, right? So the nervous that we get, you know, share the same feelings with being excited. But when we're interpreting as being nervous, we're worried about making a mistake. When we interpret him as being excited, we're thinking about being great. So you take those four things along with his purpose and practice, you know, every rep was his rep. Every set was his rep. He went from leading the league in drop passes to the Hall of Fame. You can listen to him on the School of Greatness break this exact strategy down. And he went from leading the league in drop passes, low confidence, to high confidence, not from practicing harder, but by working on his actions of confidence.
Oh man, that's a great story. I didn't know that. That's incredible. I love it. We have a lot of similarities with how we teach confidence. And I love the science that you put behind it. I'm curious, for we're doing some team consulting here, Charlie. What's the advice you would give to either a coach or an athlete who um maybe they're doing all the things that we're talking about, they're working hard, they're doing some of the extra stuff, but the win-loss record just doesn't show it, they're losing games? How do you tell a coach or an athlete to be confident when we're getting a bunch of L's and it's just not showing up on the scoreboard? What's the advice there?
Well, first of all, are we defined by win? I mean, we're in a sport, we're in a world where the scoreboard counts, right? But are we defined by wins and losses? And so what we've got to always do is, I mean, look, the UCLA coach John Wooden had a bunch of losses for 16 years.
Mm.
Did he let those define him? Because once he figured out his secret sauce about how to put together, he won 10 out of the next 11 on championships, right? So are we being defined by our wins and losses, or what we're learning and how we're growing? And so we got to play the confidence game around things that we should be confident in. Obviously, we have to look at the areas that we need to improve in, right? Because there's obviously always room for improvement. Honest self-reflection. What are we doing well? Start with that. That's where your confidence is going to come from. What do we need to do better? And then how are we going to do it as a team? And if you can start doing that practice to practice, game to game, right? Then you're going to build confidence in what you're doing. And then the outcome, the wins and losses, because the other team gets a vote, right? You're not the only one playing the game. The wins and losses are the outcome that ultimately are out of your control. So let's go all in on what's in our control. And are you really doing all of those things? Do you really have an internal ad campaign? Is your self-talk championship? Are you really doing visualization 5 days a week? Are you really getting to practice early? Are you really, getting to bed on time? I mean, usually there's a piece of that we're not looking at, and so consistency is key, and getting confidence in the process. That is 80% of the game, is confidence in the process. But if you don't have a process, you're not going to be confident in it.
I love it. Charlie, you're incredible, man. I want to close down with what I call the $1 million question. You've probably heard Brian say this all the time, but I usually end most of my podcasts with this question. The question is, $1 million question, Charlie. What do you know now that you wish you knew maybe at age 19 or 20? What do you know now that you wish you knew at 19 or 20? And I like to take the answer off of the table of there's nothing I wish I would have known because I don't regret anything in life. I want to take that off. What is something you wish you knew then that you know now as we finish up our conversation today?
Yeah, it's an important question. I think for me, the answer is two parts. First is, it all works out just fine, kid. It all works out just fine. Hang in there, you know, because the second part is, here is on the way there. Whatever you're going through right now is on the way to that next thing. So it all works out, and here is on the way there would be the answer I would give you.
Incredible. Charlie, you're quite the guy, man. How can my listeners support you, follow you, learn more about you? The floor is yours.
So I primarily engage with my audience on Instagram. It's the number one platform I use for engagement. I have a website, Charlie at Charlie Smith Speaks. At Charlie Smith Speaks is my Instagram handle. I'll make an offer, as I do on any podcast I'm on. If your listeners are interested in owning the pen to the story of their lives, they can email you their address. They can email me or direct message me their address. And I will, at no expense, like my man DJ, get you your own pen and a little card and reminder out so that you can own the pen to the story of your life. I ask that if you do want the pen, that you write me something great.
Awesome. Charlie, man, I don't say this very often, but you are an incredible human being. You can just feel, even through the screen, man, just the service and the passion that you do. It's not fake. There's some people out there that will do similar things that you do, and it's fake and you can see through it. You generally, man, you live it, and it's just evident as hell, just even across the screen here, and from just sending me this and the card beforehand, man. You're truly a man of your word and very authentic. Thanks for your time today. Thanks for what you're doing to make this world a better place. I really appreciate you, and I look forward to getting to know you more in the next few years.
Right on, my man. I'm on this journey with you. Let's go.